everybody. Today we are going to take notes on creativity. So please write in your sketchbook that the title for this is creativity. Put the date somewhere on there as well. You'll see these little doodles kind of popping up. Again, that's because I want to model what it's like to be creative. And so doodling things helps me remember, but it also makes things more interesting. So creativity and art go hand in hand. We're going to get a, not definition necessarily, but like a loose idea of what creativity is. And so creativity is about unique solutions or ideas. You can have creative thinking, and we do want, ideally, that thinking to actually turn into creation. So there's a reason that create is part of that word. So creativity is what we call a skill. So there can be naturally, supposedly, creative people, but if creativity is a skill, that means it can be learned and it can be practiced like other skills that we'd have. Now, in order to use this skill, we think of creativity as being the opposite of cliche. Cliche, again, meaning like the first most basic things that we would come up with. And so we really don't want to be basic, hence my very adorable Starbucks drink. And instead, we want to go past your first thought. So an example of that is if I said to name an animal, someone might say a dog, which is probably a lot of people's first thoughts. So we want to go past that and maybe think of something else. Now, in order to be creative, one of the ways you can do that is to have limitations. Limitations often lead to creative thinking. Some of the best inventions that have ever been made have been because people have limited resources and they have to figure out how to make things work with what they have. So limitations lead to creative thinking. Creativity is not necessarily about making something new, but about making new connections. So there are different people in the field of creativity who say it's not about, coming up with something that no one has ever come up with before, but it's about figuring out a way to make connections between two things that people thought were unrelated. And we'll kind of explore that throughout the year. So if creativity is about making connections between things, the more things you know, the more connections you'll be able to make. So the more you know, the more connections are possible. That's why it's important for you to expand your knowledge. And the more you have in your brain to work with, the more you can do things. Think of like a cooking show. So there are those like Chopped shows where they have limited ingredients and then they have to figure out how to make an entire meal come together with those random ingredients. There are sometimes ingredients where they've never seen them before, and so they have to figure out other ways to use them and ways that they've used similar things before. So really use your prior knowledge to help you with whatever problem you are facing at that current time. Here are some ways that you can expand on your creativity and how to think more creatively. So one way is you can think of the cliches. I want you to think of what comes to your mind. What do you think everyone will think of when you're looking at this? And instead of going with that same idea, you would avoid it or you would subvert those ideas somehow. So ask yourself, what have others done and how can you do it differently? Next, you can brainstorm. So in a brainstorm, you really let random ideas flow and see if you can make any of those connections between things. So don't limit yourself and only think about what you think makes sense for what's in front of you, but let all the possibilities be laid out before you and then pick through for the best ideas. Again, those limitations are there to spark ideas. One of the most primary limitations is going to be time. So I would say to use time wisely. If you are the type of person who works really well with deadlines and you work better under pressure, then give yourself personal deadlines. So figure out how you work best. If you think you're the type of person who needs a long time to do stuff, then start thinking about things early on so that you can really let your best ideas shine. Next, you can also try to come up with ideas while doing something else. Popular in science are if you exercise or listen to music, those are ways to spark creativity. It's thought that while you're doing something else, your brain is going to focus on doing that activity. And because your brain is focusing on doing that, it actually lets more creative thoughts flow through you. And it kind of lets you relax through that experience. Some of the most famous artists, music composers, writers of all time have been known to pace or walk around to exercise. You can also think of like creative ideas when you have time to do something else. I've come up with fun ideas while I'm driving in my car or staring at the ocean. Next, I do want to say that being specific is usually a little bit more unique. So if you want your answer to stand out or your solution to stand out, usually being more specific will make it less likely that someone else would have the exact same answer. For example, if you had to name an animal and you said dog, it's likely that another person would say a dog. But if you specify and say, I'm thinking of a French bulldog, it's less likely someone will have the exact same answer as you. And finally, I'm going to reiterate the idea of expanding your knowledge. So do some research in order to be more creative. The more that you learn about different topics or from different people, different artists, the more you'll be able to use those ideas in your own work. So next we're going to do a little exercise in creativity. So we're going to be using our Sharpie markers again. You can use pencils afterwards if you want to, but now we're going to do a creativity exercise. Ooh. So please turn to the next page. And again, we're going to work in our sketchbooks. You can decide which way you want to turn your paper. I imagine that splitting it in half will work. So you can split it down the middle. So imagine that my wires are right here. Again, it doesn't matter. So for this creativity exercise, number 1, I want you to take your Sharpie marker and in the top area, or in the top half of our sketchbooks, we're going to do a little bit of a doodle. So I'm going to do something random and you're going to try your best to copy me. So I'm going to go like that. So it's just a curl. It goes up, a loop, and then it goes down. Almost looks like an S. Or like a really wide kind of Y. Okay. Next we have the bottom half, and on the bottom half, let's do these two kind of upside down V shapes. And so your activity for today is you're going to take those doodles and I want you to turn them into drawings. Try to make them at least semi-decent so I could recognize what they are. You can work in pencil if you want to, though I do suggest that today we work in ink since we're practicing in ink. And that will allow you to not really care about your mistakes. I know some people are perfectionists and they'll want to erase and make a very beautiful drawing. But today we're after more creative thinking. So when you look at these, try to turn them into the base for a drawing. You can turn them as much as you'd want to so that they make more sense for you. So if you'd want these to be sideways, then that's fine. If you'd want them to be upside down, it's completely up to you. Have fun and be creative.